This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and our guest today is Bob Boyd. Bob was for 42 years with Cummins Incorporated, retired in 2008, having held a number of positions with Cummins over the years. Bob, in his tenure with Cummins Incorporated, has spent time in several different states: North Carolina, Indiana, and Ohio. Have I got that right?
That's right.
Retired after 42 years as director of what exactly?
Director of Operations.
Tell us a little bit about your history with the company, Bob, in terms of the positions you've held.
I started in 1967 as a non-exempt draftsman, out a 2-year certificate out of college, and worked for about 3 or 4 months and was drafted and went to the Army and went back to work for Cummins, and they held my job for me, and worked my way up to manager of quality by 1979 or so. And in 1980, I interviewed down here for Cummins Rocky Mount Engine Plant, then known as CDC, Consolidated Diesel. And I came down here as a manager of quality and set up the labs and hired people to take care of both the metallurgy and measurements labs and also the quality in the plant. And was here till about 1995. During that part of that time, I was business manager of assembly and test, paint and upfit. And in 95, I moved back to Indiana. I got a promotion up there as director of quality up there for our Seymour engine plant, and was there for about 3 years. And that's when my wife told me she wanted to go home. I said, "You were born and raised in Indiana?" She says, "No, home's in North Carolina." So I was able to get a position back down here as director of quality, and then moved into manufacturing again later. And I've kind of been all over the plant.
And retired eventually in 2008, was it?
2008, yes,
2008.
December.
Very good. Well, Bob, speaking of your wife, I understand early on in that trek you met her and, of course, got married. Tell us a little bit about that.
In March of 1967, I got my 2-year degree in machine design, and I was also engaged and ended up getting married in June 25th of 1967.
50 years ago this year.
Yes, thank you. And then 3 months later, I got drafted and went to the service in 1967. So 1967 was kind of a significantly emotional year for our family.
Yeah, particularly that 6 or 7 month period from
yes.
March through September.
Yes.
Where did you end up going after having been drafted?
I went to Fort Campbell for some training, and then Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then I went to Baumholder, Germany for about 9 months, and then I came back to Fort Lewis, Washington, where I spent my last year there. My wife was able to join me, and I was very fortunate. I didn't have to go to Vietnam, but I spent the time there, and then we came home then after that in 1969.
And your wife was not with you in Germany, I gather.
No. I was a little enlisted man, but by the time I came back, I did make sergeant, and her and her parents drove our car and caravanned out from northern Indiana all the way to Washington State, and I was fortunate enough to find a little 1-bedroom house furnished for $100 a month that I could afford my minimum salary, and we lived there for a year. So I think that's why our marriage has lasted 50 years, because there wasn't any running home to mom or calling or getting help. I mean, you were a long way from home.
The two of you were on your own together.
Yeah, but it was a great place. We enjoyed it out there. Needed a good rain suit in the winter, but we used to go up in the mountains, and we had a little umbrella tent, and we'd set it up and rent a rowboat for $3 and catch fish and have rainbow trout for breakfast and supper and camp out.
Boy, you make it sound pretty good.
It was. That was the good part.
Well, speaking of your wife and having been married now for some 50 years, you've identified a song for us that I guess has some connection. Pretty Woman. Tell us about it.
Well, it was all about that same time when we were getting married and the song was published and all. It's just one I've always kind of liked.
Let's hear the song. Roy Orbison, Pretty Woman. That was Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison. If you're just joining us, our guest today here on Grace Notes is Bob Boyd. Bob, you've told us a little bit about your professional career, but I understand that you've got almost as extensive a career in the volunteer arena. In particular, tell us a little bit about your involvement with the American Lung Association.
About 1985, I guess it was. I had been smoking for many years since college, and I decided I really wanted to quit. And the plant, fortunately, Cummins had brought out people from the American Lung Association to put on a clinic. It was like an 8-week clinic, and you quit on like the third week or something like that. And there was maintenance after that. And it helped me, and I was able to quit. And for about the next year, I would give, whenever they would put on one of these at another plant or in the city, I would go give testimonials and help people out that were giving the class. Well, the person that was giving the class ended up transferred up to Washington, D.C. and left, and they needed somebody to give the class, so they approached me, and I thought, well, that's pretty good maintenance. If I start giving classes, I can't sidestep, hopefully, and go back to smoking, and which I had done once or twice before in my earlier career, but nothing since 1985. So I took the training and put those on. We were putting on about 3 of the 8-week sessions a year, usually one right after the first of the year when you got the people that were New Year's resolutions, and then there was one in the early spring, and then one in September we would put on after people's vacations. And it'd be 10 to 15 people, and we were pretty successful. It was a good program, and we did this through 1995. I was also on our North Carolina board here, the general board. And then when I went to Indiana, they got word that I was putting on those sessions, so I got involved with the American Lung Association in Columbus, Indiana, and became a member of the state board there and put on several clinics there before I came back here in 98. In 98, when I came back here, it seemed like we had trouble getting people to sign up for the clinic. It seemed like we would only get 1 or 2, which you really need a team of people to put the program on. So we had stopped doing it. Plus, the American Lung Association had centralized or decentralized over into eastern North Carolina.
Why do you think it is that there were fewer people, besides the decentralization that you talk about, that were signing up?
I always kind of thought in my mind it was the people that really were interested in quitting had signed up and were taking the class. I think people that were at the point from 1998 on for the next several years were the folks that say, yeah, I want to quit, but they didn't really want to quit in their mind. They just didn't have it in their heart that they wanted to quit and were going to quit. And it's got to be a personal decision for you. You can't do it for your kids or your wife or for saving money. I mean, you've got to want to quit, and it's a tough thing to do. It's one of the tougher things in life.
Very tough, as I understand it, because it really is a physiological addiction.
Yeah.
That you need
and the drug, too. You got both physiological and the nicotine. But the nicotine withdrawal is usually 48 to 72 hours, and nicotine's out of your system. But then you got to trick your system to the mental part of the system.
Do you have tricks that you still employ?
Oh, yeah. I don't really want a cigarette, but it's when I drove, driving, longer trips, I would smoke a cigarette and thank the Lord it never hurt my kids. But I still keep a little bag of suckers in the car. If I get tired or get just bored or something like that, I'll take a sucker and it'll help wake me up and keep me going.
Do you have any recommendations for those who truly would like to quit?
Well, I think you can still get a hold of the American Lung Association. It's still active. I'm not sure whether they're actually putting the clinics on. Between that and the American Heart Association, several of them have freedom of smoking clinics, and I would heartily recommend that you get a hold of one of those and get signed up. The patches and stuff all work, but it's still, you got to get rid of the mental habit portion of it. That's the hard part.
Are there general principles with respect to quitting smoking that you think are transferable to other forms of addiction?
Yeah, probably. I would think, in smoking, one of the first things you got to do in the first couple of weeks is really track and understand why you smoke and what triggers you to grab a cigarette. A lot of people don't realize you could probably quit or reduce your cigarette smoking by half just by being conscious of it. If you got to sit down and write down every cigarette you write down, you're going to say, well, I don't really want a cigarette right now. Why am I smoking this cigarette? Mm-hmm. But then there are other things, the phone ringing and you're at your desk or you're driving your car, that signals you, your mind signals you it's time for a cigarette. And once you start writing those down, you'll immediately reduce by half. But then you'll get to the real tough ones where the phone rings and you sit down to answer the phone and you pull out a cigarette or your things like that.
Well, you certainly have had an impact on others' lives. I mean, you've identified yourself as a real beneficiary, of course, of having quit smoking, but with the clinics and so on that you've been involved with, I gather you've run into people whom you've had in these clinics.
Yeah. You're in the mall or in Walmart or something like that, and you're coming down the aisle and you recognize somebody down at the end. If they turn and go down another aisle real quick, you know that they've slipped. Uh-huh. But then also you'll get people that'll come up and hug you and really don't remember them, but they tell you, 5 years ago you helped me quit smoking cigarettes. I've never had one since. Thank you very much. And that's a good, real feel-good time there.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of your own personal experience, what would you identify as the benefits of having quit smoking? There are, of course, the obvious health benefits. Do you feel better?
Oh,
generally?
yeah. Oh, yeah. It's even more than my personal health feeling. I quit early enough that I don't think it affected my children. But, the children were always around. I didn't smoke in the house. The secondhand smoke's tough on everybody. And I can remember the factory and all. We used to, everybody would be a cloud of smoke in there by the afternoon, and so fortunately that's all cleared up. And I can remember when Cummins Diesel, it was Consolidated Diesel, then actually put a tobacco-free environment in out there. It was a pretty traumatic thing for the farmers and stuff in the area, and it was for everybody. It was a tough deal because major money's made and stuff off that tobacco. So. But it's getting to the point now where it's a little bit more manageable.
Does any of your experience connect with the Beach Boys song that you've identified as special to you? Good Vibrations?
It's just cheerful. I mean, it's an upbeat song. I always liked it.
Sounds good. Well, you're an upbeat guy. Let's hear the song, Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys.
I love the colorful clothes you wear and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair.
That was Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. Indeed, one of those feel-good songs. Our guest today here on Grace Notes is Bob Boyd. Bob is a longtime former employee of Cummins Incorporated, but has spent much of his spare time in the volunteer world. Bob, you've told us some about your involvement with the American Lung Association. I understand that you've had long connections with United Way as well. Tell us what you've done with them or for them.
I joined the board in 1998, late 98, and I've been a board member ever since. And I was a coordinator at the plant for the campaign, so I kind of got connected that direction and then was asked to join the board. Since then, I've probably been campaign chairman a couple of times. I've been president of the board, chairman of the board, and many other committees. Right now, I'm presently vice president of governance, which really deals with the practices and stuff. And I'm also on the planning committee, which really sets the stage for what we're doing now in 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I'm also head of property and on the nominating committee normally. So it keeps you pretty busy. It's a very active organization. We have a great director, Jenny Moorbutter, that does a fantastic job. And it's just nice to be able to do things in the community. I mean, a lot of volunteer organizations out there, but this one is directly involved with the stuff that's in the community.
You say it keeps you pretty busy. Sounds to me like, given that list you just gave us, you have virtually no time to do anything else.
Well, I get to play golf once a week usually, if my wife doesn't find out about it.
Well, not only are you involved in the United Way, as I understand it, you're very involved in your church, too. Tell us about that.
We joined First Christian Church right after we moved in 1981 and have stayed members all that time. My wife and I are both active in the church. Our kids were all brought up through the church. And it's a very active church. We don't have a lot of members, but we're strong at heart and a good family.
You were telling me before we came into the studio about the Yam Jam. Tell us a little more about that. Yeah,
we've been doing that Christian Men's Fellowship at the church is organized it about 20 years ago. Milton Fields kind of headed it up. And every year in the fall, we have a farmer that very graciously allows us to come into one of his fields. Originally, it was to glean the field. In other words, once he'd gone through and harvested the sweet potatoes, you go back through the fields and you pick up some of the smaller ones, some of the bigger ones that they didn't harvest. And we would donate them to United Community Ministries and other places that needed help with food. And about 10 years ago, we got hooked up with the North Carolina Food Bank, and they actually bring in a semi, and then we have forklifts, and we invite many other churches and organizations and end up with someplace between 200 and 300 people out at these probably 4 acres of sweet potato fields and harvest sweet potatoes all morning. And last count, we were somewhere over 200,000 pounds we had donated to the North Carolina Food Bank in the years past.
So typically the Yam Jam takes place in October.
Yes, it's whenever the farmer he gives us about 2 weeks notice. And sometimes it could be the last week of September, but normally it's about this time. Last year it was a little bit later.
Bob, why do you spend so much time volunteering? Whether it's at your church or with United Way or
I have a hard
something?
time saying no. I think I say, but it makes you feel good. You know, it leaves you with a warm feeling when you get done with something. You've helped somebody, or you've organized something that comes off really well. And I found out over the years I don't have a lot of skills, but one of them is a little bit of organization and leadership. So I try to use those for good.
Well, I commend you for it. As we were talking about a little bit ago, you've obviously had an impact on the lives of others through your work with the American Lung Association, and that continues in a big way with United Way and through your church. You make this a better place to live.
I appreciate it. While we're talking about it, though, just to understand the United Way is in the middle of its campaign right now. So if you have an opportunity to donate, please do so through the workplace or individual donations. We would love to have your help.
We'll put a little plug in there for the United Way. You know, Bob, as I think about it, I've spent a little time overseas, and my impression is, and I guess people have told me this, that the United States is fairly unique in its population's focus and efforts in the volunteer arena, that the many nonprofit organizations and charitable works and so on that we find throughout our country makes our country fairly unique as compared to other countries in the world. Do you have any similar impression or any thoughts on that?
Yes, I've been fortunate enough to travel several different countries, and there's good people everywhere. But it just seems like around here we jump in. When there's a problem, we join together, we get things fixed, and help out each other.
That makes me think of, again, one of the songs that you've selected. And I suppose it takes us back to where we started in talking about your personal history with your having been drafted. God Bless the USA by Lee Greenwood. Why is that song special to you?
Oh, it's just the patriotic meaning of where you live, and the fact that we live here in a free country where we're allowed to follow religion or whatever we want to do, and not have to be dictated to about our actions. And a lot of people have died to keep us free, and hopefully we're going to stay that way.
Is there anything about what you see going on in the country right now, in whatever way you want to define it, that maybe has special relevance to
Well, I think there's a couple things right now. Obviously, what just happened in Las Vegas, but the hurricanes and stuff that have gone on. And, of course, you know, we here in North Carolina are very familiar with the hurricanes we've had and the relief effort that comes after it. And my work with United Way has kept me pretty close to a lot of action that's going on around taking care of things and taking care of people and getting results. I think that's part of it. I think the other part is that, you know, when you're in the Army, you got to rank and file, and it goes up through the Commander-in-Chief, which is our president.
I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. Bob, it's been a privilege to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate being recognized.
Let's go out with the song by Lee Greenwood, God Bless the USA. You've been listening to Grace Notes, a special program here on Life 103.1 featuring people who may be relatively unknown, but who meet life's challenges in ways that brighten the lives of those around them. Our producer is Christina Dolan. I'm Alan Button, and we invite you to join all of us here at the station again next Friday at 5:30 for Grace Notes on Life 103.1.